right, definers, welcome back to Sustainability Defined, where Jay and I are here defining sustainability one concept and one bad joke at a time. Well, I'm actually the only one here today, and you may have heard at the end of our last episode that we were taking a break for a couple months because Jay's getting married, everyone. Very exciting. But never mind on that break thing. Now, rest assured, Jay most definitely still getting married, but we actually have new content for you, and we're releasing it earlier than our typical first Friday of the month publication so that we're getting you some additional information during Earth Month. So Tide is generously sponsoring this episode, focused on the impact of using cold water when doing laundry. We often get asked, what are simple things I can do to act on climate change? And after hearing this episode, we think you'll agree that one simple thing you can do is use cold water when doing the laundry. And frankly, it's what your friends and family and everyone you know should be doing too. We hope you enjoy this interview I conducted with Todd Cline, Senior Director, Head of Sustainability, Procter & Gamble, North America Fabric Care. All right, listeners, we have a bonus episode interview here with Todd Cline. He's the Senior Director, Head of Sustainability, Procter & Gamble, North America Fabric Care. He's talking to us all the way from Cincinnati, which you might expect if you know anything about Procter & Gamble. So, Todd, thanks so much for joining us to talk to us about the importance of using cold water when doing laundry.
Thanks so much for having me, Scott.
So the first thing, Todd, I want to know more about you. So I looked at your LinkedIn, right? Who doesn't these days? And I saw that you got your undergraduate degree in chemical engineering. So I'm wondering, when you were getting that degree, were you pretty just focused on all the engineering things and sustainability wasn't in your mind? Or even then, was it something where you thought maybe I'll apply these skills in that field?
Yeah, it's been a long journey for me. So I grew up in a small town in Kentucky. I went to University of Kentucky. Is where I did those studies. And I have always been into the outdoors. I love hiking and just anything outdoors. So from early on in life, I've always been really attuned to waste and litter. So if you had asked me about sustainability, it would have all been about, how do you manage litter? How do you manage waste? So I had that from a really young age. Went to school at UK, and as I did chemical engineering, I did a couple of sustainability classes.
Oh, wow.
But back then, it was very focused in our program on water and how do you conserve water and how do you think about what's going into water, which still obviously applies within what we do in laundry and fabric care. But where I really, really got, I would say, most passionate and engaged from a sustainability standpoint is I was lucky enough to live in Europe for a few years working for P&G. I became an avid skier. And I was in a ski chalet, and we were waiting out either wind or fog for the lifts to start turning. And I picked up a ski magazine. This is probably 2006-ish. And it was talking about the impact climate change could have on the ski industry and our experience skiing. And I didn't know much about climate change at that point. Right about the same time, An Inconvenient Truth came out. And that's really when I would say I started to get much more into sustainability from a holistic standpoint, moving from thinking just about waste, but broader definitions of environmental sustainability. And I've just been really passionate about it ever since.
That is a great story. I mean, I feel like a lot of people relate to sustainability through more common day things that are important to them, like litter, like you said, but also skiing. I mean, that's why we've talked about sustainable beer and sustainable spirits on the podcast, right? I mean, it's like an entryway. And once you realized all these various impacts, and of course there's going to be impacts on people's livelihoods and such, which of course matters, but in terms of just getting people's attention and making it align with their values, it sometimes helps to go to what they're focused on. It could be skiing, could be something else. So that's interesting.
Absolutely.
And so you've been with P&G for a while. It sounds like you even got some time in Europe out of it, which is great. And you've been, I think, with them for over 20 years. So Procter & Gamble, I mean, so many leading brands, they have a sustainability program that many people aspire to, really, with those ambitious goals as part of Ambition 2030. Are there any sustainability or business insights or learnings over all those years? Just a couple key ones that you want to pass on to the listeners that we can all learn from?
Yeah, I guess one is what seems obvious is not always the truth when you think about sustainability. So before I worked in fabric care, I worked in Swiffer. And that's
Okay.
the first time I got to be a part of doing a life cycle assessment. And we were doing a life cycle assessment of Swiffer wet jet relative to if you're cleaning your floors with the traditional mop and bucket. And life cycle assessment is looking at what's the total impact of a product, starting with the impact of making the raw materials, the packaging materials, your manufacturing operations, transportation, when the consumer uses the product, and then also the end of life. So if things are going to landfill or down the drain or hopefully recycled, but looking at just the total impact of a product experience. And we would have expected going into that our life cycle assessment wasn't going to look great, but we did it for a learning standpoint to help guide us on where to focus. And what really surprised us in that one is that as we looked at the total footprint, using a Swiffer wet jet was actually better than a traditional mop and bucket. And the reason was all about when the consumer mops their floors, they don't use cold water to do it. They use warm water or hot water.
It's the same thing.
And we looked at average temperature of the water, and the biggest part of the footprint was the energy to heat that water. Then as I came to fabric care, very similar story. As we talk to people about whether it's consumers or even thought leaders, when you think about sustainability and fabric care, what comes to mind? Traditionally, the first things you'll hear about are it's the ingredients you use, it's the packaging. But as you look at that life cycle assessment, over 2/3 of the carbon footprint of doing a load of laundry is the consumer use phase. And for fabric care, that is all about what temperature does a consumer choose to wash their clothes on. If you choose cold instead of hot, it's a 90% reduction in energy. So huge impact. But even cold instead of warm, it's a 70% reduction in energy. So that's really where the magic is. I'm reducing your footprint and doing a load of laundry. So I think for me, it's just finding the truths as we get into it has been really interesting in the journey of working some sustainability stuff at P&G.
Okay, awesome. So we're going to get into more of that impact of using cold water. And it strikes me that what you're identifying is a common problem in sustainability where we know where the impact is, but the impact is something that we don't have direct control over. And then it becomes really difficult, right? So we're going to get into how you're trying to do this behavior change. But man, we're really just talking about people choosing a different button. And that is just so hard to get people to change from their status quo. We're going to get into that. One other sort of more basic question for you is, I did listen to the Malcolm Gladwell episode that you and others at P&G did, where he just covered it, right? Because he thought it was interesting and impactful. And he mentioned that the day before the interview, he did an 8-mile run with you. And I'm just wondering, like, is Malcolm Gladwell in a run? Is he telling Malcolm Gladwell stories and insights, or is he like different in person when he's running with you? I don't know.
I wouldn't say he's different in person. It was clear who the smartest person on the run was. The guy is just brilliant. And really the way the run came about is I am a huge fan of Malcolm Gladwell, his books, his podcasts, just everything. I'd seen him speak once. And
he was a competitive runner too, right?
He's an amazing runner. Amazing. Yeah. So when the opportunity came up, I knew I was going to be pretty nervous spending the day with him. So I asked, well, would he be willing to go for a run the night before or the morning before it, just so I could get to know him a bit as a human and make it a little bit easier to do the discussions with him. And he came back within minutes of, yes, absolutely. I'll be in that evening. Let's get out. And it was supposed to be a 4-mile run. And the discussion was really a lot of local Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky history, just as we went through the different area, because he had been here a few times, but it was always in and out. So we were just talking about old buildings and things that happened in different places. And as we were coming from Kentucky back into downtown Cincinnati, our city has a lot of hills. There's a really large hill back behind where the P&G headquarters is.
Okay.
And he said, I've really been obsessed with hills lately. I said, well, I know how to get to the top of that one. So what was supposed to be a 4-mile run turned into 8. But he loved talking about the history and the city, and just a fascinating person.
Yeah, I feel like when I've heard him speak, he often will go off and say, I'm currently obsessed with X, and I'm also obsessed with Y. And to your point, he used that word obsessed probably with you too. And I'm like, how does this guy have time to be so obsessed with all these things, as well as, rightfully so, be a human and make time to go on runs with people like yourself? So I don't know how he does it, but yeah, he does distill and break down things in a way that is certainly useful. So I do want to now transition more to asking you more about what Tide's doing with cold water and how it works. So more just a basic question. I mean, I know I've seen in the store where there's a lot of detergents and other things marketed as green. We only use simple earth-derived ingredients or plant-based ingredients. So can you talk to us more in your mind about what sustainability really comes down to when we're talking about laundry detergent?
Yeah, sure. Well, like we talked earlier, when you look at life cycle assessment, and that looks at everything from, call it cradle to grave, although you want circularity, so there's not much graves, but impact of making your raw materials, making your packaging, your manufacturing operations, transporting the product, consumer using it, and then end of life, which end of life for us in laundry, part of that is what happens with the packaging, part of it's what happens with the chemicals as well, or the ingredients. Mm-hmm. As you look at that, by far the biggest driver is what the consumer does with it at home, over 2/3 of the carbon footprint. So number one thing from a sustainability standpoint in laundry is all about making products that work great on cold. And then number two, convincing consumers to do that so that they can have the lowest footprint. Mm-hmm. But we're not looking just at the use phase. That is certainly our core focus that you're seeing with Tide. But we're also addressing the more upstream. We have a corporate commitment to net zero by 2040 as P&G, and Tide certainly helping lead the way there. And in addition to net zero by 2040, we've got interim goals for 2030, which include 40% reduction in carbon footprint for use on the product, 100% of our packaging being recyclable, and 50% reduction in virgin resin, our manufacturing operations being carbon neutral by that point. So we're not working just on the use phase.
Sure.
But as we looked at the science, we knew that doing net zero was important, but not sufficient, because we saw that the use phase is where by far the biggest impact is. So that's why we're really focused on both rather than one or the other.
Yeah, so you talk about the impact of using cold water, and we were talking about some of these other green, they claim to be green laundry detergents. So is Tide uniquely positioned to work in cold water? Like if there are listeners out there using other detergent, are they going to get the kind of energy savings you're talking about, but also the same high level of performance? Or is that kind of a unique to Tide value proposition?
Yeah, so no matter what product you use, if you choose cold, you'll get the energy savings. Okay. And we want everyone choosing cold. And that's why we've set a goal of get 75% of loads in North America on cold. Not
just Tide. It's all
exactly the whole of the market.
Okay.
But what's different is we have truly optimized the product to deliver consumer delight in cold. And that's where people will see the difference. You'll save the same amount of energy, but the level of clean and level of delight you can get is really what we do that's different. And we've developed specific materials that are really optimized for cold water cleaning. Like we have enzymes that go after, one's called protease that goes after protein-based stains like grass stains or blood or things like that. Amylase will go after food starches. They're specifically formulated and engineered to work at low temperatures. We also have polymers that help boost our surfactancy at low temperature, chelants that go after bringing out stains caused by metals, even an antioxidant in our product that helps stop malodors from forming, because as you wash at lower temperatures, it's harder and harder to clean. And we've got a really, really robust surfactant system and a lot of it in there, which is really the starting point of a great detergent, something that can pull out all of those greasy soils. But in addition to cleaning great at low temperature, one of the polymers also helps prevent dirt from depositing back on the clothes. So as we've moved to high efficiency machines, there's less and less water in the wash cycle. Okay. So you've got these clothes with all the dirt, and the surfactants pull the dirt out into the water. So suddenly your clothes are sloshing around in dirty water. We've got a polymer that prevents that dirt from redepositing, because generally when you get something that starts to get dingy or gray over time, it's not because you're getting it dirty wearing it, you're getting it dirty washing it because of the redeposition of the dirt back on. So detergents are they're a pretty complex product category.
Yeah.
And we've built a lot of technology into how do we provide the best cleaning on cold that we can.
Got it. So let me make sure I've got this right. So the surfactants pull out the dirt. The polymers make sure it doesn't redeposit onto your clothes. And then what do the enzymes do? I missed that one.
So enzymes, think of them as they're targeted to specific types of stains. So if you get a grass stain, for example, it's hard for surfactant to pull grass stain off of clothes. So enzymes go in and basically chop up the grass stain. Protease will go after proteins that are on your clothes. Amylase go after a different material. Mannanase, yet another one. So different enzymes, they're really specialists that go after a particular type of stain.
Okay, and so it sounds like the surfactants and the enzymes are the ones pulling things off, and the polymers are keeping them from reapplying.
Yeah.
Okay, and are all Tide products now formulated to work well in cold water, or if people want to make the switch, they should buy certain kinds of Tide?
No, all of our Tide products, all of our laundry detergents for that matter, that we manufacture are designed to really delight in cold water. So for us, it doesn't matter which one you're using. We want you to be able to use it in cold and feel confident with it.
Okay, awesome. That makes sense. And going back to that 90% energy reduction that can come if you're going from hot to cold water, does that impact differ by the type of machine, the type of clothes washed? I imagine it's big regardless, but I mean, if there's a listener out there who's got an older machine, is it even more important for them to make the switch?
Yeah, so the percent is about the same across, whether it's the old traditional top load or the newest high efficiency front load or an HE top load. The percent reductions are pretty similar. But what's different is if you're in an old machine, you use a lot more water that's heating. So the absolute energy reduction is even more. Yeah.
Okay.
Regardless of machine type, cold is the way to go.
Cold is the way to go. Okay. So I want to talk more about the behavior change component. So you mentioned this goal, 3 out of 4 of all laundry loads in the US and Canada, you want to see go to cold water. And that's just not Tide, like you said, it's all. And it sounds like right before you made this commitment, a little less than half were in cold. And then 1 year later, you've got a little bit more than half. And so after 1 year, you're like a quarter of the way to your goal, which is amazing. Right. And I imagine you probably picked off the low-hanging fruit consumers, where maybe they heard about it and quickly made the change. So it might be a little more difficult as we go. So rightfully so, you're digging in and you're saying, okay, what do people view of this habit and how do we get them to change? So my understanding is you worked with World Wildlife Fund. You did a survey of Americans. And this was interesting where apparently about 6 out of 7 Americans said one eco-conscious habit is to make sure I've turned off my lights. But then when it came to putting the laundry in it with cold water, only 0.5% of Americans listed it as a home energy-saving eco-habit, even though, like you're saying, you can reduce energy use up to 90%. And it's that simple of just clicking a button, just like turning off a light. So that kind of blew my mind a little bit, that there's this knowledge gap as much as there is a behavior gap. So how do you make this number go up? I mean, is it more marketing campaigns? Is it celebrities and eco-influencers? Where are you all at in the best lever to pull to make that behavior change?
Yeah, it's amazing, the numbers that you just talked about. And we're really on a mission of how do we make turning to cold the next eco habit in homes? Because it is a really, really easy habit to change and the impact is so large. So achieving that 75% of loads for the decade on cold would save enough electricity to provide all of the electricity needed for New York and San Francisco for a year.
Wow.
So the impact is huge. Or washing a load on cold is equivalent to powering down your entire house for an hour. So the amount of impact someone can have if they make this simple choice is going to be massive. Mm-hmm. But there's a reason people have learned to do laundry the way they do it. It's not random that people choose warm or hot or cold. There's reasons that they make the choices. I think the thing that we have going for us as a starting point before we did any of the work is already close to half of loads were done on cold. And the reason they're done on cold is because people realize that for clothes that I want to maintain and keep a long time and not do damage to, cold is the best way to go. Clothes don't shrink.
Right. That's why I did it, Todd. I have to be honest, before I knew about the energy savings, I was like, I can't mess up this way.
Exactly. It's the best way to care for your clothes. And the vast majority of people know that. And that's why some of their loads already run cold.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing they've learned over time or been taught is you need warmer temperatures to get deep down through clean. And that's why some loads have warm, some even have hot. And it's a learned behavior, because when people do laundry, their first objective is not how do I minimize my environmental footprint normally, it's how do I get my clothes clean. So what we've worked on is, number one, how do we create products that no matter what temperature you choose, you're going to have amazing results. So there's no reason to ever choose warm or hot. So it starts with, you've got to have the product to back it up.
Yeah.
Because if you try warm or you try cold instead of warm or hot and it doesn't clean very well, you're not going to go back to cold. So
totally. It's like any sustainability product, right? If you say this product was made with regenerative agriculture, but the food itself doesn't taste good, no one's going to buy it. Same
Exactly.
thing. The performance still has to be there.
Exactly. So number one, we have to deliver the performance. And then number two, we have to convince people that it's worth doing more of their loads on cold. And we're trying to reach them with different messaging. If you see some of the things we do, we're really trying to reach people where they are. So we do talk about reduce your environmental footprint as one of the benefits. But for a lot of consumers, we're just not quite there yet on making habit changes just based on environmental benefit, unfortunately. So we also have other things like reassuring of you can still get a deep down Tide clean even in cold, but also you can save up to $150 per year on your utility bills. That's something that just about everyone can get behind of, wow, by making this simple choice, I can save a bunch of money on my utility bill for the year. And the environment doesn't care about the motivation on why you chose cold. The reduction in carbon footprint is the same, regardless if you did it to reduce your environmental footprint or to save money. So, we're early in the journey. Like you said, we're about a quarter of the way to our goal on percent of loads on cold. We've got a lot of work to do still on just how do we unlock the ways to enable habit change, but we're off to a good start.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're going about this the right way. And one of the things I read about is that you've got a partnership with the NFL where 16 teams have said, we will wash our laundry in cold. And so my understanding is the amount of laundry, like over 1 million pounds that they're going to do per year in cold with Tide, these NFL teams, that's going to be more laundry than a person does in their entire lifetime, which is kind of just studying in and of itself how much clothes they go through. But also you talk about reaching people where they are. I imagine there are some NFL fans where maybe the economic savings will matter more than the environmental impact, perhaps. But even just knowing that the NFL team they love is doing this, and well, shoot, if it can wash cleanly the clothes, the sweat of my favorite NFL players, surely it can wash my clothes clean. So I think the right partnerships probably is also important, yeah?
Absolutely. And the NFL one in particular was a ton of fun to work on taking on how do we solve washing on cold for them. And it went really, really smoothly on how do we get to the right formulas and the right settings in their operation. And both the teams in the Super Bowl this year washed on cold, including our Cincinnati Bengals, who didn't quite pull it off in the end. But
not quite. It was close, though.
I don't know that we can support the claim, but it looks like if you wash on cold, you will also go to the Super Bowl.
I mean, you've got a sample size of one now, so
exactly.
I think that's pretty conclusive. But what do I know?
Yeah, but it was a ton of fun to work on. And I think it's a great thing to frame for people of exactly what you said. Well, if it can handle what the NFL does, as far as they're probably sweating and getting dirtier than I do in my daily life, and Tide on cold can tackle that, surely it can tackle what my family needs.
All right, so Todd, just going back to the survey point where only 0.5% of Americans said washing their clothes in cold water is an eco-conscious energy savings habit. Is this something you're going to update over time? I want to see if this thing moves.
So yes, we'll absolutely be tracking it over time. We've set our ambition of getting 75% of loads in North America on cold. So we'll regularly track. We're already regularly tracking. That's how we know we've made good progress in the first year of communicating it. But just to make sure we're achieving our target and knowing when we need to intervene and how we're progressing on it. So we'll absolutely be updating over time.
Okay, we'll look for that. Maybe we can update our listeners on that. So we've talked a bit about the Tide and World Wildlife Fund partnership, and I know you all are now embarking on this research project to better understand what cues lead to behavior change. And one of the things that stuck with me was you all were looking at, well, what do we already know about the behavior change? And apparently over 60% said they would wash on cold if they knew it could help the environment. And when consumers do try washing cold, they are likely to keep the habit, citing brighter whites and colors, better clothing longevity, and a sense of personal accomplishment knowing they have made an environmentally friendly choice. So, okay, it sounds like the cold washing is a win-win in terms of cleaner clothes, less energy use, money savings. So is there a downside? Are we missing it? I want to make sure I'm not missing it. And I listened to that Malcolm Gladwell episode, like I said, and I was waiting for it. First, there was some buts, but he didn't have one either. So, is there any downside to cold water use?
From my perspective, no. And that's all we do in our household. And my wife and I are both runners, and we've got...
Your clothes look clean, Todd, I must say.
Yeah, 9 and 11-year-olds that their clothes probably don't look clean at this point in the day, but they did what they left this morning. But yeah, what's not to like of if you can reduce your carbon footprint, you can save money, and it helps your clothes last longer, and you get a great deep down clean. It's one that's really hard not to like. So it's really about making sure that we can get the message out there and reassure people that when they use cold, they're going to get that great clean that they expect.
Right. No, it makes sense. And I want to ask you, though, about one thing. I was talking with my girlfriend yesterday about this episode, and she was wondering about sanitization, right? And so I looked into it, and there is this article that talks about it. So in this article, it says that Todd asked Charles P. Gerba, or better known as Dr. Germ, which, love that, to do some research into the hot versus cold conundrum. And Dr. Gerba, he's a professor of virology in the Department of Environmental Science at the University of Arizona. He's internationally renowned as an expert in detecting pathogens in water and food. So to test this, Dr. Gerba, he dirtied more than 20 laundry loads by adding some nasty stuff, E. coli, human coronavirus 229E, which is cause of the common cold, and a replica for a type of a stomach flu virus. So he washed them in cold water, 60 degrees Fahrenheit, with an industry standard detergent. He then dried them in hot water, and here were the results, that there was no E. coli or common cold viruses that could be detected in the washed and dried clothes, and only the stomach flu virus remained, and that was eliminated through a hot water wash, followed by a complete drying on a hot setting. So these results, do they disprove the myth that washing in cold can't sanitize?
Well, I think what he found was that the vast majority of loads, you can feel very safe in washing them in cold. That healthy households or a household with an occasional respiratory virus can confidently wash all of their loads in cold. And then in a household that would have the stomach bug that was tested, separate those clothes of the ill person, wash those on hot, but the rest of the loads in the household, you can still wash on cold. So I think the big learning that he had in the study was you can feel safe with the vast majority of loads being washed on cold.
Yeah, that makes sense. Plus all the other benefits we mentioned. So, let's say some listeners here, they're bought in, Todd. They want to learn maybe a bit more. They want to keep up with the progress, see if you meet that 3 and 4 laundry loads in the United States and Canada use cold water goal. Where can they follow you and keep up?
I think start with Tide.com. So we certainly engage in sustainability and what's happening with us there, but also just watch for continued activation with us. We had a lot of fun with the cold callers, advertising copy, doing Malcolm Gladwell's podcast, your podcast. We'll continue to be out there just looking for how do we, just unlock the willingness for consumers to try cold. We know that we have to have habit change happen. It's a difficult science, habit change.
Yeah.
And we have to make sure that, we're showing that there's more gain with changing the habit than pain with changing the habit, and building in cues to remind you. So I think you'll continue to see a lot from us in this space.
That's great. And I like the cold caller thing, the iced tea and Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Yeah.
When like you said, you said you had fun writing the copy. I mean, that's got to tell you we're probably on the right track. If we're having fun putting this together, this is probably going to resonate people. And it's good when you have people that don't normally talk about sustainability talking about it. I think that probably helps too.
Absolutely. I think it just opens up more people to the idea. And also, again, the fact that it doesn't just talk about sustainability, and try to reach people where they are. And, who doesn't want to save up to $150?
I do. And when and in terms of other partnerships, there was the one with Hanes, right, where you had wash and cold on the packaging. I mean, can listeners expect to see more of that sort of on-package messaging as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think partnerships, package cues, we're evaluating everything we can to just help remind consumers to make this choice on cold. So absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I work a bit more in the recycling space in my day job, and I think of the how to recycle label. It's almost more like a how to wash, and there's already, of course, washing instructions, but even just having this as part of it, that making clear it can be done and that you'll get the same performance. So beyond listeners using cold water in their wash, is there any other advice, call to action you want to give the listeners? And maybe even more advice on, let's say listeners like, I'm bought in, I'm going to do it, but how should I present this to my friends and neighbors? With just give them the facts. Is there anything in terms of how to present it that maybe your research is showing that can lead to more people making the change?
First, the what else that you mentioned first. I think one, recycle. All of the packaging of our Tide bottles are recyclable. You mentioned how to recycle. We need a lot more consumer participation in getting recyclable stuff into the recycling stream. So as we think about laundry and sustainability, recycle, it's not the biggest footprint. It's, choose cold, but also recycle. And the other thing is, if you're using a high quality detergent, you can keep your clothing longer, which just further expands the environmental benefit, both on the footprint of making new clothing and then the land use of textiles going to landfill. So, wash on cold, recycle the packaging, and keep your clothes longer. And I think you're doing pretty well from what you can do on the laundry side of things. I agree. What can get lost is changing something as simple as washing on cold. Does it really have an impact? Because it seems so small. But in North America, we do over 30 billion loads of laundry per year. And when we get to 75% of loads on cold as part of this ambition, for the decade, we will avoid over 27 million tons of CO2 going into the atmosphere. So these small changes on something that people do so often per week really, really add up to be a huge impact from an environmental standpoint. And I think that's the key thing we're trying to get across is, one, it's a small, easy change you can make. But two, because we all do so many loads of laundry in a year, it really adds up to have a big impact.
Totally. And aren't those greenhouse gas emission savings, isn't that more than Procter & Gamble's footprint?
So what we would avoid for the decade is like 10x the annual operations footprint of P&G.
That's nuts when you add that up.
So yeah.
Okay. And quick question before I get to my last question. So you mentioned recycling the laundry detergent containers. And this is something I'm just wondering, because I, of course, want to recycle it. Do I have to wash it out before I put it in, or can I sort of just empty what's left, if there is any left, and put it in the recycling, or do I have to rinse it first?
So you mentioned how to recycle. It should tell you on there, just empty it, put the cap back on if you're using the liquid, and put it in the recycle bin.
No need to rinse.
It's that simple. Yep.
Okay, good. That's what I've been doing. So last question for you, Todd. So this is our traditional last question. And I want to imagine that we're at a laundromat. And we've chatted up the other people in the laundromat. Why not? And we want to impress them with some fact around the importance of using cold water in your laundry. You've given out, I think I've counted at least 2 or 3 party facts here already. But do you have another one that you can provide our listeners that they can throw out at a laundromat to impress their fellow laundry doer?
Yeah, I think I've already given the best facts, but I think in any laundromat, you could ask just about anyone, what do you think the number one thing you can do to reduce your footprint as you do this load of laundry, and give them 3 guesses. And I would bet the majority of people, even with 3 choices, won't get to choose cold water. So it might be a way to earn some money if you're a betting person of setting up some sort of scheme on it. I'll bet that you can't guess the way to do the most sustainable load of laundry. But it's all about, choose cold over warm, 70% less energy. Cold over hot, 90% less energy. And that temperature choice is 2/3 of the life cycle impact of doing a load.
All right, so people can save $150 per year if they choose, or up to that amount if they choose cold. And that doesn't even include the money you can make from this hustling and betting that you're referring to. So
Exactly.
All right, Todd. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I think this is, like you're saying, it's just a simple, easy choice. You get the same performance. It's no brainer. I hope the listeners enjoyed learning about it, and I appreciate you making time to educate us on it.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, let's throw some cold water on this episode and wrap it up. I'm just going to imagine Jay and everyone listening laughing at that. It's very satisfying. All right, we want to thank Square Peg Round Hole and Potions for the music used on this episode. I want to thank Keaton Butler for her usual expert editing of the episode, and also Amelia Kovac for helping us get the episode online and sharing the word on social media. As always, we welcome your comments, your questions, your constructive criticism, whatever you like, to us, hosts, HOSTS, at sustainabilitydefined.com. And I still want to read a review. We actually didn't get one in the time since we published our last episode. So again, please rate, review, and subscribe. But with reviewing on Apple Podcasts, we might read your review. So I'm going to go to an old one now. It's from Arlie K. from February 2nd, 2022. It's titled Empowering. So Arlie said, Jay, Scott, and their incredibly knowledgeable guests shone the brightest of, and this is in parentheses, solar-powered lights on what it means to live an eco-friendly lifestyle. Fun, insightful, and engaging are just a few of the words I'd use to describe the time you'll spend with them. It's a newfound favorite. Arlie K. Oh. All right, everyone. I think that about does it. You all stay sustainable out there. I'm Scott Breen, and as Jay Siegel would say, we'll see you next time.